Hello friends, psoas muscle, iliopsoas, is a complicated muscle. I know a decent amount about it through my research and my studies, but there's a whole lot I'm still learning about it. The couple of things I know from working with my body, and oh my gosh, I don't even know how many hundreds of bodies I've worked with at this point in time, right? I'm 11 years into this, is that it is tight in a lot of people. And it's not even that it's tight. That's not even the language I want to use. It's locked short is what physical therapists might call it, right? Because it is contracted so much and it has that constant contraction and tension that it just gets locked into this position. So some of the tightness is not just like, oh, I'm going to stretch it and I'm going to be able to let it go. That is an element of it, but some of it is the nervous system, right? Your survival mechanism of fight, flight, or freeze. Every time that you go into that part of the system, one of the effects is when adrenaline moves into the body. That's the chemistry, right? Adrenaline moves into the body, and when adrenaline moves into the body, this muscle contracts. So in addition to be contracted all the time because we're in a rounded society where we're in flexion a lot, seated, doing various things, sleeping in a fetal ball at night, whatever, we spend hours and hours of our daytime in a flexion, in contracted state. Right? And then add to it that every time our stress response goes off, these muscles contract to get you ready to fight, flight, or flee, right? So it's pretty complex. I know a decent amount about it at this point in time, but there's still a lot I'm learning about it. But what I do know is that when I was having issues with that and then my internal abdominal wall just being constantly contracted, this was one of the poses that my teacher, Carmen Fitzgibbon, gave me, and I did it religiously every night for a good long while, and it made a huge difference because it's not only working with lengthening the musculature and the fascia and the tendons and the ligament, right, everything around that area, but it's also working at a subtler level. It's a restorative pose that's working at the level of the nervous system. Right, moving you towards that parasympathetic or rest and digest. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking. But I do want you to have that background into it and why I'm putting this out here. You do need 2 blocks. A strap is awfully handy, a blanket, and you'll notice I'm not on a mat, I'm on a hardwood floor. Now, if you're on a carpet or something, you can still do it. You just have to work a lot harder at being able to slide into it, and that'll make sense in a little bit. So you're gonna take your strap, your belt, your bathrobe, tie, whatever the heck you're working with, and you're gonna make a pretty decent size loop, slip the loop, and you need a wall. Sorry, you also need a wall. So if you're like, hit pause and go get that stuff. It's not a big deal, man. You can hit play again in just a second. Don't stress yourself out. You just contracted the psoas. See what I mean, Jelly Bean? We're gonna take that strap around our upper thighs. I'm around a pretty meaty part of my thighs here. And I'm going to tie that in. I don't want it so tight that I'm gonna have a huge mark left where the strap was like, meaning my legs in, right? But I am gonna have it on there so that I have to work a little less, right? Now, when you get in, if you're like, that's not really helping me, and you find that it would be more beneficial around the calves, you can switch that, and I'll talk about that. Hopefully I'll remember to talk about that in a second. You're gonna have one of those blocks all the way up against the wall. And if you're really tight, start on low. You can always boost up to medium, right? I'm gonna start at a general medium, and once you've done it for a bit, yeah, you sure can go to high, but don't start at high. That's just, again, why are you pushing yourself? This is about relaxation, right, and tenderness towards the body. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna have that other block on standby off to the side of my body. I'm gonna measure my distance from the wall, right? I could do it without the block or just kind of next to it. So I'm gonna bend my knees a little bit and bring my butt a little closer. Bring that block back in if I move to the block. Put my feet on the block, yeah? And if you wanna move a little closer, you can. I've got that blanket down so that when I come down onto the earth, my shoulders and my head are on the blanket. That's the part of the body that we're gonna move in a little bit, right? Now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna move my feet where I feel stable on my block so I can lift my hips up and bring that other block in on my sacrum, right? I'm not in my low back. I'm on the top part of my pelvis where I feel nice and sturdy, so move it around until you feel that
Reestablish your feet against the wall. You can see I have a ledge, which makes it a little more difficult. If you have a wall without a ledge, that's awesome sauce. I don't, right? But I want my heels and my feet, if all of them can, but if not, just my heels, to make contact. I still have a little bend, and this is where it gets kind of tricky. I might interlace around the block or just put my hands on the block, and I'm going to slowly start to straighten my legs and pull my block under my sacrum back with me, right? So this is a variation of Setu Bandha Sarvangasana. It's a bridge pose. Now, I'm fine with leaving the blanket underneath me. If you need to move it because it feels uncomfortable, you can. Before I get too settled in here, I make sure my strap has my legs so I don't have to effort as much in my legs. I do have to effort in my feet, pushing my heels into the wall and trying to keep my toes up and my inner groin down. So that action will go on the whole time. Not all restoratives do you completely release every muscle. Some of them we do work. Be careful of locking knees. I'm almost done talking, I swear. Go ahead and roll your shoulders underneath you like you would in Setu Bandha. You can interlace around the block. For me, that's a little extreme. I can't quite get it on medium, so I would rather just have my arms out to my side a little with my palms turned up, much like Shavasana, right? I'm going to be on the very center square part of my skull. And I'm going to pause. Now, if you're like, holy crap, my low back is in pain, the other action we can all bring in is pulling our frontal hip points towards our shoulders, our head side of the mat, and we can reach our buttocks flesh to the backs of the heels, right? This is that pelvic wheel we often do in class. And I'm going to keep the pelvic wheel action. I'm going to keep my feet pushing into the wall action, my heels particularly, right? For me, I need to rotate my inner groin down a little bit. You could drop down to low. You could come up to medium or high. You can find out what block works best for you, what block height. And now close the eyes. So it's a lot of talking to get you in, but the specificity, I think, anchors you deeply in your body, A, and B, hopefully allows you to work with a little bit of freedom once you're there. Right? What do I mean, work with a little bit of freedom? So you do have those actions, but hopefully the grounding of the heels at the wall helps you feel grounded. Yeah? Hopefully that pelvic wheel lets the low back, it's not going to get hurt. If the low back is still like, holy crap, you might come down a level. Right? Be at a place where your body feels like, although it is working slightly, it can also know it's safe, and the nervous system can start to, we'll say we're going to pacify the sympathetic system, right? To bring balance. Maybe even activate our parasympathetic, our rest and digest. So feel the props supporting you. Bring the awareness into the very front of the hips, right, where that psoas muscle goes. And if you want to visualize it from the front of the thigh bone, slightly inner thigh bone, right, coming up over the front of the hips, that whole thing lengthening right now, all the way up to the top rim of the pelvis-ish, and then it wraps around and goes all the way behind the body, connecting on the right and the left into the low back. Maybe you feel at this moment, or maybe just have a knowledge that one of those is tighter than the other, yeah? Or feels more restricted, might be better language. Maybe you can push a little more through that heel. So don't force the psoas into the length, right? Bring the awareness into that muscle. And just like saltwater toffee, right? Think of it just slowly lengthening because of the shape of the pose, not because you're trying to make it happen. And you might even bring your awareness into the inner bowl of the pelvis. What do you mean by that, Crystal Joy? If I were to imagine my pelvis, my frontal hip points, right? And if I were to imagine that on the inside of that, moving around to the back of the pelvis, right? Behind my organs, but in front of my spine and my pelvis, that area, right, has some muscles and definitely a lot of fascia running through that whole area. What if even that area could soften here? I'm saying this a little later than I wish I would have, but if you are having your moon cycle at the moment, this would not be a pose to do when you're in your moon cycle. That's a downward flow of energy, which we want to help, right? And right now I'm in a slight inversion, so. Check into the muscles of the face, shoulders, arms, hands, fingers. Torso, hips, all the way down the legs, the feet, and the toes. And of course, we're not releasing every single muscle. There are some actions we're maintaining. And if you are someone who hyperextends, really check into those knees. With the weight here, they'll often go into hyperextension. So just think of your calves gently working up to the ceiling. So in case this is new to you, we're going to start to come out of this. To come out of this, go ahead and bend your knees and place your feet on the ground, much like you would in a bridge pose, right? A supported bridge pose. Pause. Let the body do a little transition there. There's no need to rush. Push into the feet. If at this point in the practice you're feeling really heavy and it's hard to get off, you could even come up on your tippy toes if that helps you make clearance to remove the block. Roll down one vertebrae at a time. You might try to roll that spine out. Now this is where I'm going to try to wiggle that blanket out and bring it so it's just underneath my head and not underneath my upper body. I'm going to pause for just a moment here, letting my body transition. Now you got a couple of options. I'm personally going to hug my knees in after I do windshield wiper. I like to twist before I move from one extreme to the other. So I'm just going to go ahead and let my knees, I walk my feet out a little bit, and I'm going to let my knees sway just slightly from side to side. And then I'll bring my feet back in, and now bringing those knees into the chest. The pose we know so well, where we're in this position so much. You might even rock a little bit from right to left there. And notice the body, right? Again, if you're not used to this posture and you already have lordosis, which is excess curvature in the low back, this can be difficult at first. You might start really, really low, right? And then slowly after time, as the body opens to this shape, I mean, it's not just the tightness of the psoas, there's a ligament that runs on the front side of the spinal column that if it's been in a short state for long, ligaments take forever because they have no blood flow, right? So let this open up for you. And maybe you get to a point where whether you go higher or lower, right, whatever your height is, maybe you just start to stay in it a little longer and the body starts to open up, right? Again, we're working with a lot of different things. I'm going to point out two different things. One is the physical lengthening of the front side of the body through the psoas and abdominal wall. But the second, which I think is actually almost more important than that, is the nervous system, right? Because you can lengthen that thing as much as you want, but if you're constantly letting adrenaline come through your body, but if you're constantly in your fight or flight,
it's going to contract every time, and that tightness will continue and continue and continue no matter how much you stretch it. I personally think the more important of the two is the nervous system work. So, okay. Namaste, friends. Be calm, be well.